Well, dear friends, dear audience, we continue with this series of webinars on important international events that should not be forgotten by the international community. And today we have two very distinguished speakers to debate and discuss the situation. What has really been happening in Kazakhstan, and what is the possible way future for a more democratic Kazakhstan? My name is Astrid Thors, and I'm the chair of Liberal International's Human Rights Committee. We are saying that Liberal International, that is the global organization of liberal parties with over 130 member parties all over the globe. And we are an organization that has also a human rights committee since many, many years. I have the honor of chairing this committee. And one of the good things, the few good things with the pandemic, is that we have been trying to work more and more digitally, and in that way we can have very interesting, very distinguished speakers at a bit more ease than normally. Let me just say that as household rules, you will be able to put questions, written questions, in the questions and answer, let's say, system here, and we will at the end try to get them answered by our distinguished speakers. I don't think I need to say much as an introduction to the situation in Kazakhstan, because our speakers will deal with that. I think we were very upset when we saw and heard about what the authorities had been authorized to do, to shoot against their own citizens. We were very, in the early days of this year, upset by the pictures of looting, questioning the way that the authorities named those who were participating in the unrest. So today, as I said, two very distinguished speakers, and I first will give the floor to Prime Minister Akezhan Kazhegeldin, who was the second Prime Minister in Kazakhstan in the 90s, who has also written and worked extensively, written the book, The Right to Choose. I think that was a book that had very big implication for your personal life. And you have also been active working with the Roundtable of Civil Society Organizations in Kazakhstan, with the organization of the opposition outside the country. The floor is yours, Prime Minister. We are with interest wishing to hear your takes, so to say. What was really happening, and what are the advice you could give the international community to try to help possibly and be help the opposition in Kazakhstan? Please, Prime Minister.
Thank you. I must say that in general, what is behind of this magnitude, peacefully running Kazakh nation and all the street and squares of majority Kazakh city and center of regional power, including old Kazakh capital Almaty, is because of long-term men and the ruling family taking advantage to have the right and change constitution in their favor, and just becoming absolutely blindless and deafness to people, ordinary people who demand a much better condition of life. It's not surprise what happened and why. It's not surprise what the current government trying to do and describe what happened over there. It was, you can imagine that, not over 90% of Kazakh population, they live for $5 a day. But at the same time, our Kazakhstan is one of the richest country with oil and gas and other materials like copper, zinc, uranium, everything. Also, we are one of the biggest producers of wheat, and we have a lot of meat producing by our people. And at the same time, is so big and large and visible, displayed obvious poorness, and including last 2.5 years with pandemic, and plus the all changed with climate, and the people are just very upset with condition of life. And plus, the government made a very big corrupt decision to raise up overnight the price for liquid gas, just not only using for heating the houses and cooking for food, also all the Western Kazakhstan already changed their car from fuel, normal fuel, to liquid gas, which is cheaper and environmentally very good. And all this price just rise up during the night more than 250%. And secondly, just much before of this situation, one of the very small company belongs to youngest daughter of Mr Nazarbayev, the living president, who is fortunately for us already left the power. And she was heading this organization, small company. They also raise up the price for utilization of car, which is not going to for treasury. It's not really duty accepted by the parliament as the normal duty and taxation. This is duty by the one small private company, and money went to her account, and people was already upset. And as soon as the oil man, leading by trade unions, local trade unions, they went for strike, ordinary people leading by NGOs and activists, they took the street for peaceful rally, demanding in the beginning economic issues, and the next day they start to negotiate and demand to political change, start the reform, which is promised by Mr. Tokayev 2.5 years ago. And one of the biggest issues was Nazarbayev should leave the power, family should leave the economy, and stolen assets have to be returned to the country. In only one place in Almaty, a group of extremists interrupted peaceful rally, and they not just because they're extremists, or I don't trust how the government described the situation. It was people driven and by clan of Nursultan Nazarbayev, because they were not happy how to progressing so-called transit of power from Nazarbayev to Mr. Tokayev, and they believe that they can compromise not only peaceful movement. They was, first of all, they have want to compromise Mr. Tokayev himself as the weak, and they believe that they can change the situation, calling back chairman of National Security Council, previous president. In terms of national security, he was above the president. It was very unusual situation in my country, used to be until 6th of January 2022. The previous president having the chairmanship of this council, he was above the president, current president, in terms of many things. And also he used to control central bank, all the national wealth fund, he controlled nomination and appointment, all this head of security apparatus. That was too much. Unfortunately for them, Tokayev, he managed to seize the control overnight, 2 nights, and he probably, in terms to save his power, even maybe life, he appealed to collective security treaty organization. And I must admit it as the observer, he made it very fast. It was only solution for him to save his power and save his life. Okay, what happened afterward? This is not concern only me and as Kazakh, and not a big issue for all Kazakhs. And I believe that, and I'm thankful for your attention of situation. Okay, we have right now the same what happened in 2011, the first bloodshed in Zhanaozen after oil people, the strike, went for strike more than 6 months. And exactly the day of independence, 16 December 2011, the peaceful people gathering at the square of small city, Zhanaozen, they being shot dead by the special group landed recently, just a couple of hours before from the capital. The same happened. Group young people went to square, they provoked violence, they start attacking local bank, they burned the local bank and the police station, and afterward, these 100 people with machine gun went to the square and start to shoot. And officially, government says it was only 16 people killed, but we have evidence that number is much bigger, and twice bigger number of wounded. And what happened these days, exactly what happened 10 years ago. Some of body, they were burning in cemetery during the night. They making exhumation of somebody, absolutely not understandable what reason. They're making it without knowledge of member of family. And seems to me this is the event to hide evidence, because there are a lot of people, you can see that what social society activists made, and they recorded too by the telephone and iPad, even on the hospital. You can see that there is a lot of body, people shot exactly in the heart or exactly on the head. And some people said, or government said, it is a sniper who used to work for police. To clean up the street, they fought against the terrorists, but you can see that exactly what happened, you must understand, it was execution. When the snipers shooting from long range to people on the street, all this you can find out, this is exactly different to event. And therefore we have a right to demand from Mr. Tokayev. This time, investigation have to be transparent, and all civil society called international observers to participate in this investigation, and the expert from abroad have to participate in this investigation, which he was already denied recently, a couple of days ago. Yes. During the interview. I totally disagree with him, because he already mentioned 6th of January, there is international involvement, there is terrorists from abroad, and therefore Kazakh must say, or it was really internal, or they have to admit foreign experts and observers to participate this investigation, because this is unacceptable bloodshed, and the people majority of people who passed away during these 3 days, they are innocent, peaceful. Some of them, they found them burned in own car. Husband, wife, and kids, they are not extremists, that somebody killed them, and then they fired the car, and they're being not just killed, they're being also burned. This have to be investigated.
May I here in the meanwhile invite Regional Director Nix from the International Republican Institute, and you are the Regional Director for Eurasia. And we understand that you have been following democratization in former, let me say, Soviet Union space. And what of this information that Prime Minister has now conveyed to us? What is the, let's say, take in Washington, and what do you also see as the steps forward? I think we will revert also to the question of the investigation, let's say the calling of the Csto that is very, very interesting. But what is now the take in Washington in general, and what possible measures are to be discussed, maybe in the Congress, maybe in other parts of the international community? Mr. Nix,
Okay.
please.
Okay, we used to work with United.
Prime Minister, could I invite Mr. Nix now for a while?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you, Astrid, and your organization for inviting me to be part of this event. Kazakhstan is extremely strategically important. You just heard an excellent overview from the Prime Minister as to what happened on the ground and some of the reasons why those events took place. I'd like to really get into the basic question asked in your format is, what happens next? But before I get there, I just wanted to say that none of us at IRI were surprised that demonstrations began in Almaty. We had been on the ground. We closed our office in Almaty several years ago, but we still have assets on the ground. We're working with civil society organizations. And in trips to the region, my staff learned this growing sense of dissatisfaction that the Prime Minister mentioned. And as he puts it, the government putting a deaf ear to this economic dissatisfaction, this impatience waiting for political openings, political reform, which isn't happening. And so we think that these were some of the drivers for the demonstration. So none of us were surprised when they first happened. Then, as the minister correctly noted, there were other elements that joined these peaceful protesters who were there to show support for democratic reform and economic reform. As the Prime Minister pointed out, there's a tremendous misalignment in terms of the economy and incomes. So we had these demonstrations. I think the salient point that we saw was that surprised us was the vicious crackdown, the violent crackdown that took place. Secondly, we were surprised, quite frankly, those of us who follow Kazakhstan very closely, that the Nazarbayev network, if you will, has been reprimanded. And my belief is that the Nazarbayev brand has been damaged by these events, by the role that his network played, as described by the minister, in some of the more violent aspects of the demonstrations. So now you see Nazarbayev out of power in government, out of power in terms of Nuratan political party, and seemingly on the sidelines. So that's a tremendous event. It's shocking in some ways to many of us. But the other surprise that we saw was the deployment of Csto troops, which you alluded to, Astrid. We feel this is tremendously significant because if one looks at the charter of the Csto, it is a charter designed to protect its membership from external threats. It was designed to be a counter to NATO. Instead, in this instance in Kazakhstan, it was used to ward off an internal threat, at least as described by the government of Kazakhstan. Since the deployment of these troops, you've heard the voices in the Russia Duma proclaiming that this organization has the right to deploy troops in similar situations in any of the member countries. What does that mean? That means if Alexander Lukashenko is in trouble in Belarus, Russia reserves the right to deploy Csto troops in that country. Same as Kyrgyzstan and the other member countries. And again, these voices in the Duma are talking about the need to use this organization to counter what they describe as color revolutions. And let's face it, the term color revolutions is code for external forces like IRI, like NED, like other international organizations interfering in a country's politics. So that to us is very significant, very disturbing, very alarming that the Kazakhstan precedent could be applied in other countries in the region. And then last point I really want to make is, again, to address the question, what next? Again, as the minister pointed out, the citizens' concerns have not been addressed. The government has turned a deaf ear towards these demands. But Hopefully that will change. Hopefully the Tokayev government will realize that there is a general desire among a significant number of the population for openings in democracy, for greater pluralism, for the creation of real opposition parties, for more openness from civil society organizations and NGOs, economic empowerment. And these clearly were the demands that the Tokayev administration had to witness. The question is, will they act on them? I'll make a couple points. I think sequence-wise, right now, what you're seeing is a consolidation of power. The Tokayev administration is doing everything they can to consolidate their authority throughout the country. And second, I think the goal of the administration will be to ensure a sense of stability for a certain period of time, to make sure that the environment is calm, things are quiet. And then we hope, and again, perhaps I'm being optimistic, but I have to hope that after this second stage of stability, there could be a third stage in which the government would allow for openings in economic reform, democratic reform, judicial reform, many of the things that have been promised but have not been acted upon. So that's really the way we see the sequence is the events took place, now there's consolidation of power, followed by stability, and then we hope for greater openings for the Kazakh people and organizations that advocate for these openings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. And as you mentioned, both of you, the expectations of the people, but also the very famous notion of color revolutions, and that means, I mean, that is a signal word for many of us working in the international community. Don't interfere with things. One question that has been raised is whether Tokayev has the force to act, because he, in a way, his power base, is it strong enough, or is he in reality dependent on the Csto organization? I'm saying the Russian Federation. I now put the question to you, Prime Minister. What is the, and you mentioned also the investigation, and that Tokayev had rebutted the European Parliament resolution and other calls for an international investigation into what happened. At the same time, I think he had said also that, or there were sayings that Tokayev did not trust the security apparatus in the country, and therefore had at some time called for Russian authorities to investigate what has really happened. What would you say of Tokayev's power base, Prime Minister?
I hope that he is slowly putting everything in order, changing head of all security apparatus, is moving toward right way just to regain the power and establish his own position as the new chapter of our history. But it all depends on how he's going to conduct, because last week he made several contradictory steps. It looks like he's dancing waltz. He's not marching toward somewhere. He's not stepping back. He's not stepping in the side. And unfortunately, he is not really stepping forward. But this is a situation, I believe so, because I knew this gentleman a long time. We used to work together in the same government. I spent with him a lot of time traveling abroad and calling investors to our country. And I totally believe that inside of him, his brain is different than Nazarbayev, and he understands that Kazakhstan couldn't and shouldn't be like previous. We have to move somewhere. But same time, he's also concerned about, he's still struggling to save the power. And he's really concerned about disintegration of our society and the state, because there is, in economic terms, we can see there is some sort of separatism. People in the West, they absolutely, they have a right to demand more dividends from oil and gas they producing every day. And therefore, Tokayev is very concerned how to share power, because the future is he must share power with parliament, and also he have to share power with local government. He must start to establish local government running with own agenda, with right for part of the budget. This is not issue for him to make it. But biggest problem of Tokayev is money, budget, the huge amount of state assets, not just cash, state assets stolen, is already laundering and the hiding in the West, including EU, United States, United Kingdom. And one of the help you can make for Kazakh people, for Kazakh nation, is join those politicians, especially in Parliament, European Parliament, and Parliament of United Kingdom, and the United States Congress, both chamber, who is right now start to mention to take economic sanction against inner circle of President Nazarbayev and personally against him, and to freeze the assets stolen and hiding abroad. And then afterward, they can negotiate with Kazakh government, new government or previous one, is depending how open and transparent is going to be administration. They can afterward start to release this fund and send them back in favor of Kazakh nation, because all these assets stolen from them, not from state. This is a lot of work Tokayev have to conduct next 2.5 years, because there is new election. And there is still big mistrust. The majority of people believe that he is, because he's nominated by Nazarbayev, he believes that he's still part of Nazarbayev. And also he made very strange step back recently, being elected as the head of Nuratan party, which is, I believe, is politically mistake. I don't know what reason to get back with this party, because this party for Kazakh population is most corrupt political organization. And this is exactly what he have done. Seems to me there is some agreement. Seems to me he's trying to be delivered what he promised, but same time I using my interview, it is only tools to communicate with him and with my citizen, because I am abroad. I already sent him a message to say, listen, right now you have to not believe that apparat and bureaucrat can defend you. You have to appeal and try to get back to you and your project people, ordinary people. They can save you. They will vote for you if you will if you will really start to deliver what you promised. But there is anticipation is huge. I'm optimistic, always want to believe that he will try to make good thing for Kazakhstan, but he's surrounded by serious circumstances, including the organization we just recently mentioned that. And but I think that our biggest challenge right now, not only from the north, we're having cautiously looking for what's going on with Chinese leadership, because with new leadership of China, situation is dramatically changed in Eastern Turkestan. And the previous leaders of China, they were quite accurate with what they made with a neighboring country. But first time we can see that there is violence against Muslim minority and Xinjiang, including ethnic Kazakh. Seems to me the new leadership of Kazakhstan couldn't be tolerant on this, and this big issue for Kazakhstan as well. And the third, the biggest also concern, the biggest our challenge from the south is unpredictable situation in Afghanistan, and therefore it have to be understandable for you that Kazakhstan probably will create a new relationship with all Central Asia states, and the United States and United Kingdom and European Union. You have to change your policy in Central Asia. Don't try to work with them. It used to be 10 years ago, but established by Euro Commission policy that taking all 5 stands as one. No, they're all different. They're all separated. They're under influence of Russia, but now more under influence than China economically, including economic terms, but they are absolutely different. And if you were going to help the oldest state to unite together to create market Central Asia, to create normal cultural relationship, even be ready to defend themselves in terms of extremist movement will try to seize the land from the south. It's still not obvious, but still possible. This is what the
Thank you, Prime Minister. I think there are so many threads that I fear I cannot manage them all. But I'm certain that Stephen can help us here because of the, let's say, the larger regional implications and the advice you, Prime Minister, give to the EU and to the rest of the international community. Change your policy. I know that the EU has a special representative for Central Asia. That's a question I could also ask. Has the EU at all been seen, and in what way in the region? But that's a question I put to you after we have heard Stephen Nick's views, Director Nick's views on how should the policy be changed. Can we? What is your take on the Chinese influence? Because we also know that some years ago, some of the Central Asian countries were more or less, I think, forced into the economic cooperation with Russia. Then people said that this would be detrimental for Kazakhstan because of the economic ties with China. Prime Minister, you mentioned Afghanistan. So the wider regional implications, they are not to be forgotten, but also the advice you give. What is the discussion now in the States of, let's say, applying a sort of Magnitsky law or seizing the assets that are in the Western banks, in Switzerland, in UK, in financial centers all around the world, not to talk about the so-called tax paradises. Director Nix, please.
Yes, I'd like to comment on two salient points that the minister raised and expound upon them. First and foremost, his point about Central Asia versus Kazakhstan. I agree completely that these countries are different, they're distinct, and have to be dealt with differently. I can recall that the State Department of the United States wanted to call groups together to help devise a Central Asian strategy. And we resisted and opposed that. My response was, the United States doesn't have a Slavic strategy for Ukraine and Russia and Belarus. We don't have a Caucasus strategy. Why would we require a Central Asian strategy? These countries are all different, as the minister said, and they have to be dealt with differently. That's the approach the United States should take. That's the approach the European Union should take in all of their efforts in these countries. Second, the minister's point about this administration needing to deal with the reality that they have to contend and share power with local government. I think this is a critical point. And again, Astrid, I promised you I wouldn't bring up Ukraine, but there are some parallels. After the Revolution of Dignity, we worked with the government to really assist mayors and city councils to empower them because we thought this was the way of reform. President Poroshenko agreed and gave greater power to these localities. And so now if you see IRI polling in Ukraine, where Ukrainian citizens see reform, where they see change, where they see improvement in their daily lives, is at the local level. And I think that example is entirely applicable to places like Kazakhstan and other countries in the region. So again, if I were a policy planner in the EU or the United States, I would be looking at local government and I would be working with the national government to allot more power to these localities, because we see reform as a ground up movement. And we think that this would be the appropriate way to try to institute reforms in Kazakhstan. As big of a country as it is, we think this would be an appropriate model. Real quickly on the China question, when we had an office in Almaty, IRI used to do national polling in Kazakhstan. I'm sure the minister remembers some of the polling data. To me, one of the most striking things, we always ask the same question: what is the most important partner strategically for Kazakhstan? And the majority of Kazakh citizens responded two main countries. It was predominantly China and Russia. And then far below in the single digits was the European Union and the United States. We simply we weren't a factor in public opinion because Kazakh citizens don't see a visible United States. They don't see a visible EU. So I think the charge for both the US and Europe is greater engagement in Kazakhstan. It's strategically important, and there needs to be time and effort. And let's face it, our Congress and our administration is faced with a lot of issues right now. It's hard to get attention with the Ukraine-Russia issue, with Belarus, with China, with everything else that they're dealing with. But we have to remain steadfast, and we do that on the Hill. We are constantly briefing members of Congress that they need to pay attention to what has happened in Kazakhstan in recent months and weeks. But more importantly, in the long term, there has to be investment, there has to be attention to this strategically important country. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And what you, I mean, the advice you give on continuing to engage. I can also say that there have been times when I have visited the beautiful country of Kazakhstan, Almaty, and other places, and the voices I heard from civil society were also saying that also it's good to have predictable partners whom you can rely on. And I think that there was a situation also where the European Union was very, very absent, hadn't a special representative even on Central Asia. Okay, that's for some reason that they have, but now they have. But may I come back to you, and Prime Minister, and ask, do you think that there will be, you were talking in the beginning of the investigation, that there needs to be an investigation on what happened. And now there's the let's say international investigation has been rebutted, but will there be, because if you make a parallel with Ukraine, we know how difficult it was to get really an investigation who did what with the snipers at Maidan. And I don't know if that is yet clear. And because, of course, that can reveal some difficult truth about whether Tokayev can rely on the security forces. Can he rely now on the security forces? Will he be able to conduct the necessary, let's say, putches or cleaning up of the security forces to get that stability and in investigation? One other question I would also have is that how is now, let's say, access for citizens to international networks, to internet, because there was, as the pattern is in authoritarian states these days, when something happened, there is internet shut down and restriction of those. Can citizens now follow discussions and influences? Prime Minister, what is the situation?
Thank you. The first question is very interesting, and the majority of Kazakh society, including me, we demand international participation for investigation with simple issues, with simple reason. We don't want the current administration, like previous one, well, why they reject international participation? Because they worried about what really happened, and they driving by idea to hide somebody who is responsible and to punish those who is not participated and called already by administration as terrorists. There is no terrorist. Some of them is extremists, that for sure, but they are not terrorists. There is not foreign centers who lead them, who spend money, and right now is more and more evidence they have not really buying weapons, with serious weapons. It was not plane landed to Kazakh airport with foreign militia. That all is not true. Okay, what happened was 2011, without international observers, our investigation went nowhere, almost nowhere. Only one investigation conducted by Kazakh government, it was about people, one of very well-known politician is very popular, Altıbek Sarsenbay was killed, and FBI participate, and they find out real what happened, and we still know who is behind the scene, but this question is not finished yet for Kazakh society. Only one who was responsible for this is former oldest son-in-law, President Nazarbayev. He killed himself in Austrian jail. Okay, that's why people believe and people demand foreign international observers to investigate, because they don't trust own investigators. This is exactly what, and this is what I can say. And of course, the government will resist, administration will resist, but it's depending how much pressure they will experience from the Western side, because you must understand one very important point, that the United Union, European Union, the United States are really far away, but economic influence and economic tools and instrument is still huge. By the way, all we have, we deliver into a global market, and the income which is stolen, big amount of stolen in the last 25 years, but still feeding our budget and still feeding our life. And therefore, the United States, UK, and the EU still important partner, much important than China right now, because Chinese economy in very weak situation right now. They demand over $30 trillion to get back to normal level. Russia is also, in economic terms, not really capable to spend money for all these neighbors to support the current regime. Is very expensive for them, and therefore you have to understand how much you're powerful. If you will understand that, if you will follow your principles, if you will not give up yourself being frustrated by Kazakh diplomats, and then you will get back to normal situation. And the Kazakh citizens, they really believe that only West, with some terms of human rights and transparency, they really will help the Kazakhstan to establish the situation. For example, I just want to pass a message to Hill and Biden administration. The biggest capital spent by America to build a pipeline, which would give Kazakhstan opportunity to participate in global market. And the biggest income and revenue from selling oil is coming from the West. But who is more enjoyed this pipeline right now is Chinese company. Some of them belongs to state, but some of them belongs to ethnic Chinese. The company is offshore. And who is partner of this company? And member of Nazarbayev family. This is exactly what you have to consider. When I say just freeze these assets, and I will understand that you will understand, there is not going to be next uprise the small people who is left the power. They will not coup against Kazakh people and the current administration. But it's still possible because they control billions of dollars. Every single member of Nazarbayev family, adult, they are multi-billionaires. It is not gossip, it's not rumors. This is already proven information. Some of them right now in the hand of American lawmakers on the Hill. Some of them right now in the hand of United Kingdom lawmakers. We believe that both branch can press the government, because as the previous, in my experience as the man who used to work for executive branch, I can say, executive will never do something right until they will push by parliament. This is nature of executive power.
That's the nature of executive, and there are so many good suggestions you are coming with, and I maybe I can return to one question. You said that the old Nur Otan party, Tokayev should not have taken up the position to head. What are the strengths of the other political parties or movements or civil society? Can they stand up to the challenge? I so much agree with Director Nix about decentralization. Life is local, and you can also have the responsibility, see the responsibility, and see where your revenue, where your tax money goes. But the other important thing is, of course, state the rule of law. And without rule of law, you cannot fight corruption inside the country. How can we strengthen, help the Kazakhs strengthen their own rule of law? And I also think there's one factor that we need to figure in. The international community maybe has drawn some lessons from Afghanistan, maybe have not. But of course, the one thing we should always remember, it is the Kazakh people themselves who will and must be in the driver's seats, and we are just making their efforts for rule of law and for democracy stronger. They are in the driving seat. We can never impose that. That doesn't work. We know that Ukraine was the case. It was the popular uprising, as Stephen was saying, the revolution of dignity, as you mentioned. But what about, let's say, strength of the civil society inside the country, the state of rule of law? I give now the floor to you, Mr. Prime Minister, but I also want to highlight some questions we have got from the audience. Please, Prime Minister.
Okay. First question is very good. We have two legacies. Legacy of Mr. Nazarbayev, which is shabby and just recently collapsed. It was absolutely weak state, but mentioned about 20 years, the big, stable, big, very powerful, stable state, with iron hand, etc. All this was not true. But second legacy is very important for my nation and for me as the person, and it respond to your question, is we having very good, very smart people on civil society side, NGOs, who can produce constitution, draft of law to introduce them to parliament. We have, it's not like, empty area. There is very well educated people who is right now currently in Kazakhstan. They listen me, that because they're very important to work with them. And I would call the NDI and RI to come back to Kazakhstan to establish again, because you used to help us in the beginning 25 years ago, very, very much. We established law with your support and your assistance. You have to get back there to help the new generation of Kazakh young politicians, young people who is right now between 25 and 40. They are our future. We can just help them with our advice, but they are our future, and you have to work with them. There is not hopeless. There is some hope, but just please be more strong, not just give up. And I know that, especially in United States, there is so many issues, there is so many targets. And I joked a long time ago with Mr. Biden. He was that time the head of international relation, foreign relation committee of Senate. I said, we're not lucky, just so far. You're always busy, or Balkans, or Middle East, or somewhere else, North Africa, then long time with Iraq, then long time with Afghanistan. But probably it's time to wake up and just remind that yourself. There is some Central Asia, there is 75 million Turks living there. They're having 5 stans. We also sounds like Afghanistan, but we're a little bit different stan. And just get back to our soil, get back to our country, help young generation to establish. There is very good partners with you. You will very workable, you will suitably work with these people. And yeah, there is a lot of things you can do. It's of course, but today, why is Nuratan is not welcomed by me? The problem is we have in parliament. In the terms of Russian Western observers, this is parliament. And there is some party who representing Kazakh population through the party. But in fact, they're not representing Kazakh citizens, they're representing only power. Over 80% belongs to Nuratan. This is parliament of Nuratan. This is branch of executives. This is not the second or third branch. This is bunch of the same trees. Absolutely. Therefore, I strongly believe that president should leave his party as soon as possible. Establish new election before general presidential election of parliament. And they get back to system used to be 20 years ago, majority system, working with people, let them elect their own politician locally, then start to share the power, as we mentioned, between center and the region. This is what we can do and have to do.
Prime Minister and Director, we have only a few minutes to go, but I think there's one very teasing question to Director Nix. Is IRI ready to return to Kazakhstan? That is the question. And I think the message you give, Prime Minister, is very important. Continue to be engaged with the country. That is, I think, and then target your actions very, very smart to get the assets, maybe target some people who have been corrupt and who have committed those. And thirdly, also the international investigation. I think there's also one thing which is very important that is mentioned here in our Facebook conversation, and that is Kazakhstan is part of Council of Europe, our European democracy body's bigger Venice Commission, which is the one that has been giving advice on constitution and legal reform. And that is also a tool, certainly, that must be used. But my question to Director Nix, we have just 5 minutes to go, and I'm speaking too much, I know. But let's say, so would you agree on these practical steps in making political quality change for the country? This is coming a question from the question and questions part of our webinar. And would IRI be ready to return there for the country? If you could answer that, and then we will give the final word to the Prime Minister before we end.
Thank you, Astrid. Real briefly, because I know we're short on time. We are interested in listening to the embassy and USAID in Kazakhstan about potential work in Kazakhstan. We are working with civil society groups and NGOs now. We no longer have a physical presence in Kazakhstan, but a lot of this would depend on the current government, whether or not we would be allowed to re-register our office and have a physical presence. We are interested in Kazakhstan, but there has to be these steps by the government, not just for IRI, but for other NGOs, and to allow opposition political parties to be created, to exist, and to operate freely. We have to have entities like this to work with if we want to build a truly pluralistic political system. So we await the steps of the current administration. We are in discussions with USAID. IRI would certainly welcome the opportunity to return physically to Kazakhstan if the conditions were right, if we're able to operate. The late, great chairman of IRI, John McCain, was always insistent that if we go into a country, we have to get results. That was his really mandate to us. Steve, you can go into country X, but you have to obtain results. If we feel that we can do that in a big way in Kazakhstan, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to return. Thank you.
Thank you. And Prime Minister, your last words to this audience, and really, if there's something, the advice, the voice you want to give to the Kazakh people, and and the pledges you would make for the next steps that the international community. And I think there have been people who have been listening carefully to you and been giving many advice. And also, I think a question is, please inform us about the platforms where the discussion is going on the future of your beautiful, rich country, where I hope that it will never be an ecological catastrophe, as some people have been saying, that also there are some very, very big and real danger for the nature, for the steppes, and for the snow leopards that you have in Almaty.
Okay, what I'm going to say, I like very much this panel, and I will ask you, please, keep your eye wide open on situation Central Asia and Kazakhstan. I'm afraid this area is going to be on your focus next years and years and years because of situation at this area. And as much as you can, provide your help and assistance, work hard with our administration, help the new generation of Kazakh citizens to establish their future, their own normal political, a very established, free Kazakhstan. Because we strongly believe, being Asian, nomadic culture, we just want to create a state like Japan, South Korea, which means that Asian people can establish democracy and they can function normal as the European Western states. This is what exactly we demand. That's why Kazakh is desperate to study and speak not only Kazakh language, Russian, French, German, and English, because they understand this is the route for knowledge, route for the future. Please push your politicians, sometimes just turn them up toward us. I just want to give you a very old Kazakh story that when the god establishing this globe, very tired, deeply sleep, and waking up in the morning because somebody knocked his door. He said, "Who are you?" He said, "Listen, I'm Kazakh. Why are you disturbing me? You know, you made good job. You just spread everything in your hand to everybody. You've forgotten about Kazakh." He said, "How I can forget?" He said, "Yes, you see, I'm just front of your door and behind of me, my nation, and nothing. And therefore, God delivered and brought to Kazakh everything. We have steppes, mountains, forest, rivers, lake, even small lake looks like sea, the Caspian. But only we have right now, we just demand something, attention from your side. Keep your eye open on my country."
Thank you, both of you, Director Nix there in Washington at the International Republican Institute, and you, Prime Minister in London. Thank you for a most interesting discussion. I think you have really, really fulfilled what our intention is with this series of webinars, because we want the international community not to forget the different situation. We have had webinars on the situation in the Philippines, of course, on Belarus and Russia, and we will continue with other. Also, the attention, of course, needs to be on Afghanistan. There are too many things on the plate, as you said, but seldom have I been inspired by so concrete advice as by you, Prime Minister. So what I read about you before is that you are optimistic, you are so knowledgeable about the country, you can help us also make a correct interpretation of what is happening and who are those things. So please, don't hesitate to be in touch with us. And I also want to thank my good friend, Åsa Nilsson Söderström from Sweden, who helped us set up this webinar, because it was she who had the good advice. We should get in contact with you, and we know that her organization is also working in many of the countries, seeing the difference between them in Central Asia. So thank you very much for your efforts and for your contributions, for giving your time, and we will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.